I walked into a high school in New Jersey last year to speak and learned of a senior boy on the campus who had a great athletic reputation, grabbed a lot of headlines during the football season. But I discovered in speaking with some of the faculty people, the kid had another reputation because they told me that one boy, starting in junior high school, had fathered 5 children, each one by a different girl, yet he continued to maintain status on his campus. I want to ask the young men in this audience a couple of questions. Why is it so many young fellows operate their lives in the double standard philosophy that it's okay for any boy to exploit any and every girl he ever gets the opportunity, but if you ever caught a kid dating your sister or any girl you do respect, if you respect any at all, with the same motives in mind, you'd beat them half to death? A little girl walked up after an assembly one day and she said, "You're certainly right, Mr. Yearout. My older brother, every time I have a date, practically makes the kid take a lie detector test. He virtually shadows us on the date. Some of his buddies have been wanting to take me out, and he wouldn't hear of it. He knows what kind of crummy characters they are because they're like him." Back in Pennsylvania 4 years ago, off the college campus in this particular community is a well-known college, and then off the campus down by the river is a beautiful wooded area where the high school crowd like to go and park. Now, I don't know where you kids go, if you've got a mountaintop, a gravel pit, or just a shady lane with some shady activity. Well, one night, 6 guys in the local high school shared a bottle of whiskey. Now, the interesting thing was that these 6 young men, prior to this incident, had been highly respected on the campus and in the community. They didn't even drink, but one of them procured the bottle, said to his buddies, "Let's drink it for kicks," and they did. After consuming the whiskey, they were feeling pretty high, and one of them said, "Hey, why don't we go down to Lover's Lane and bug some kids?" So they came sneaking down through the woods, and they got down there, and they discovered one car parked, the boy in the back with the girl. So they sneaked up to the car, jerked the door open, hauled him out, and beat him senseless. And then apparently, because of their whiskey-sodden brains, dulling their ability to any longer think intelligently, one of them said, "Why don't we rape the girl?" So one by one they climbed into that car. When the 6th boy climbed in, he suddenly became very sober because the girl was his sister. Now, I didn't make up the story. It's a documented fact. Fellas, do you have to turn to a bottle for, quote, courage, end of quote? What do you have to do to try to prove that you're a big man? It seems very tragic to me that some fellows have been brainwashed into believing the only way you can prove manhood is in four ways. Guzzling the stuff out of a bottle, driving your car like a fool, exploitation of girls sexually, and your muscles, whether it's to play sports or walking around poking people in the face with your fist. The second question I want to ask is, guys, what kind of a girl do you intend someday to marry? Now, a lot of fellows respond to that question in a manner they think will qualify them as a real swinging mod. "Oh, well, when I get married, I'm going to marry me a woman with experience." Any guy who says this one of 2 things is true, you're either extremely stupid or you're a liar, or you're both an extremely stupid liar. Because, fellas, when you get married, that girl will only be your wife. She'll be the mother of your children, and I would assume you'd like to be proud of your home and of your family, and I seriously doubt if you'd want to go walking down the streets of the community where you live with the girl beside you, the mother of the baby in your arms, knowing that she'd been sleeping around with half the guys you met on the street before she became your wife. No guy in his right mind would marry that kind of a girl to be the mother of his family. Yet there's this little group of guys on most campuses that like to stand off in some corner bragging to their buddies about all the conquest and their technique with girls. Well, of course, a lot of this is only bragging. In fact, I've discovered a quite serious problem exists on many campuses. I've had a lot of girls walk up to me after an assembly with tears in their eyes and say, "Mr. Yearout, a few weeks ago I dated a boy on this campus. He tried to make me, he didn't succeed, but he came back the next day and told all his friends he did. Now he and his friends meet me in the hall, and they give me these filthy, dirty, leering looks. They'll stop by my locker and say, 'Come on, babe, I know your type. You want to go out with me tonight?' And Mr. Yearout is spreading throughout the whole campus so that none of the decent kids will have anything to do with me. Why does the boy do this when it's all predicated upon a lie? He does it because he is sick, sick, sick. I sincerely hope no boy on this campus conducts himself in this manner, but if there is such an individual, I'll tell you your problem. You're so desperate to try to appear a big man to your peer group, to your buddies, and you think that this is the way to do it, by dragging some little girl's name through the mud when it isn't even true. If you want to find out what kind of a man you are, you walk up to some boy on this campus as big as you are, look him right square in the eye, and call him some filthy name. And when you lie prostrate on your back eating your teeth, you'll get the idea. The last question, well, we know, of course, on every campus there's always 1 or 2 or more guys, depending on the size of the school, who really have a reputation with girls, and they earned it honestly. They're the big Casanova type, the guy who walks around the campus saying, "Boy, look me over, girls, I'm God's gift to women." And what really bugs me is a lot of silly little girls go chasing after this kind of a guy. Well, if you're so unfortunate as to catch up with this character, I've got news for you. When he gets ready to get married, he will not be interested in you, because this kind of a guy, someday down the pathway of life, expects to marry some fabulous, wonderful girl who's had enough courage to maintain standards in her life. My only question is, why should such a wonderful girl wait for such a crummy heel? Now, I was talking that way on the campus once, and a boy walked up to me after the assembly. I thought he was going to take a poke at me, and he said, "Yearout, it's okay for you to get all over us guys like you did today. We deserve it and we need it, but Mr. Yearout," and I'm quoting him, "why in the hell don't you talk to those girls? They need it too." He's right, and you're going to get it right now, girls. It takes two to tango. Sometimes I walk on the campus and a girl will come up and say, "Mr. Yearout, you seem to know teenagers pretty well. May I ask you a question?" "Yes, what is it?" "How come the boys around here don't treat me like a lady because I'm a nice girl?" Well, I've explained one reason, girls. You ought to be very, very careful about whom you date. And may I say something to the younger girls in this audience? Sometimes you girls are so desperate to get in the swing of things dating that you'll date anything that wears pants. And the trouble today is you never know who's wearing pants. But I'll tell you frankly, you're usually treated, girls, exactly the way you deserve to be treated and the way you want to be treated. When I walk on a high school campus and see some of the girls parading up and down the halls wearing these micro miniskirts, they used to worry about the kneecap showing, and now it's the hip. When I see some of the girls looking like they've been poured into their clothes, and I wondered every step of the seams are equal to the task. In fact, it looks to me like the living girdle just plain died. I want to tell you, girls, if you walk down the halls of your high school wearing clothes so tight that you're having difficulty breathing, all the boys are having the same problem. And a lot of times the girl goes out on a date with a boy and has to end up slapping his face and saying, "Where did you get the idea I am that kind of a girl?" Well, honey, maybe he believed your advertising. A little girl walked up to me after an assembly one day and she said, "Mr. Yearout, do you think my dress is too short?" It was about the length of my coat. And I said, "Well, honey, it's either too short or you're in it too far." I was in the principal's office last year talking about the assembly. He said, "You want to see the auditorium?" I said, "Yes." We came out in the hall, started down toward the auditorium. The kids were all in class except for one girl wandering down the hall with an armload of books, wearing, I do believe, the shortest miniskirt I have ever seen. I thought it was a wide belt. The principal nudged me and said, "Mr. Yearout, look at that. It is disgraceful." About the time I looked, she dropped one of her books. Yeah, you've got the picture, I believe. When she picked up that book, I lost all my religion. You know, I often wonder about mothers of girls like this, but then I've seen some of the mothers. I don't wonder any longer. I wish some of the mothers could spend a week in my assembly schedule. A lot of times my assemblies are held in gyms. Not in the situation we are today, but where I stand out in the middle of the floor and the kids are up in the bleachers, starting about 8 feet high and then on up, and you wouldn't believe the view. I am getting so sick and tired of looking at garters and girdles and a few other things, I can't believe it. And I assure you that it doesn't turn me on, it turns me off. If I want to look at underwear, I'll get a catalog. Reminds me of the kid lost at the county fair, and the guy was trying to help the little boy find his mother, and he said, "Son, why didn't you hang onto your mother's skirt?" The kid says, "I couldn't reach it." I must say, in fairness to the girls, I've also been on some campuses where I felt the only way the boys got their britches on in the morning was with axle grease, and that they only went to the barber maybe twice a year for an oil change. I was walking down a junior high school campus in Long Island, New York last year. In front of me, a cute little blonde with shoulder-length hair. I walked up and tapped her on the shoulder, said, "What's your name, honey?" It turned around and said, "John." I'd like to ask the girls a question now. Gals, why with your wonderful and fine minds do some of you want to believe these ridiculous lies that boys have been peddling to girls for at least 100 years? And the reason I know it's that long, I can remember when I was a teenager. And it goes something like this. Now, come on, baby, you were in love. You love me, don't you? Then prove it. All the other girls do it. It's about time you got started. That is a lie on 2 counts. Number 1, all the other girls are not doing it, not yet, thank God. And number 2, and listen to this carefully, girls, that boy proves by that statement that he doesn't know anything about love, because if he really loved you, he'd care about your health, about your mental state of well-being, and about your reputation. The only person he's in love with is himself. And he wants to gratify his physical desire, you're handy, and that isn't love, it is lust. It seems a shame to me that so many fine junior and senior high school girls across America have been brainwashed into believing that the only way you're going to have dating popularity and a boyfriend is to throw away all your values. Come on, girls, you can maintain high standards and be popular. A lot of young men have said, Mr. Yearout, I'd like to find a girl to invite out on a date who offers a challenge. But about all you find anymore is a pushover. Now, I'm not advocating you become prudes or little holy Joe types, the type that go around, oh, I'm so goody, goody, goody. I can't stand people like this. The kind of a girl who's out on a date with a boy and says, now you stop that, you old nasty, nasty. You've got to maintain your dignity, your sense of humor. You have to have a few brains and the ability to use them. A little girl came to me after an assembly near West Point, New York last year, and she said, you're right, Mr. Yearout. I dated a cadet last year from the Point, and boy, socially, that's the top of the ladder in our area. In fact, I was the envy of every girl on the campus, and I was so excited about the date, I thought I couldn't live till it happened. And it turned into a nightmare. She was very candid as she told me what happened. I assumed they were parked somewhere, and she said the guy was feeding her his big lion, only she wasn't buying, but she said he apparently thought I was. So after he figured he'd made sufficient progress, she said, Mr. Yacht, he started trying to unbutton my blouse, and I stopped him. So he fed me some more of his line, tried the second time I stopped him, but she said the third time he was so insistent that I finally slapped him and said, take me home. Well, he did, but she said he flew into a rage, and all the way home he really put me down, told me how stupid I was, how ignorant. Didn't I know about the new morality and the pill? And she said, Mr. Yacht, by the time he got me home, I was so hurt and confused and mixed up, I ran into my room and cried most of the night. And I began to seriously doubt my value system because I knew some of the girls on my campus lived this kind of a life and seemed to be doing pretty well. I figured he'd go back and tell his friends at the Point and no more dates would come from there. We'd get around my own campus and any girl wants a social life, a boyfriend, and dates. And she said, Mr. Yacht, I was about ready to bag it all when I received a letter from the cadet 3 days later, and among other things he told me, he thought I was the most fabulous girl he'd ever dated. He respected and admired me, not only because I had convictions, but the courage to live by them, and I assure you, young people, there's a great difference. And he said, could he please take me out once more to prove he knew how to be a gentleman when he was out with a young lady? And she said, Mr. Yacht, I've continued to maintain my standards, and I have no shortage of dates. Girls, the truth of the matter is there's a very small number of boys. I'm not knocking all the boys. Most guys are pretty fine, pretty decent. But there is this little tiny group of guys that completely dehumanize every girl they go out and look at. To this kind of a person, you are not a human being or a person. You're a body. And some of these characters have the idea that simply because they take a girl on a date and they're so magnanimous, they spend 50 cents on the movie and 50 cents on the hamburger, wow. They're spending money like it's going out of style, and after this big investment, they think they bought the right to a 2-hour wrestling match in the back seat of the car at the end of the date. Apparently some girls don't mind being treated like this. Leave that kind of a girl with this kind of a boy. The last thing I want to talk about is I believe your number one social problem in high school, and that's going steady. Now, when I say this, I can hear the little wheels grinding, and I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, come on, Yearout, you old goat. What do you know about going steady? Well, this old goat knows a lot more than you probably wish you did. Now, I want to make a statement about going steady, and you hear it carefully, so I'm not misunderstood. It's perfectly possible for 2 high school young people to go steady and maintain a beautiful, wholesome, fine, and wonderful relationship without sex part of it. I know kids like this. I'm sure some of you have this sort of a fine relationship. If you do, I respect and admire you. But I'll tell you that most kids on the high school campus who go steady over any period of time allow sex to be part of their relationship and then justify it by walking up to me following an assembly and saying, why, Mr. Yearout, we aren't promiscuous, we're in love. You are? If this has happened to you, I can give you a simple test to prove your love. Knock the sex out of that relationship and see how long it lasts. And a lot of kids have said to me, honestly, Mr. Yacht, it wouldn't last 5 minutes. That's what holds it together. And that isn't love, it's lust. Now, why is it a problem for kids your age? For a very valid reason. The average teenage boy, 16 to 19, and sometimes earlier age, depending on his physical development, is at the very peak of his sexual drive and desire that he'll ever be in his whole life. While a girl at the same age, again with rare exceptions, could care less about sex. Now, this surprises a lot of boys. In fact, one day in a question and answer session after one of my assemblies, a boy seriously asked me this question, Mr. Yearout, if girls aren't for sex, what are they for? And so you sit here today, young man, and say, well, what does the girl want out of the relationship? Well, she wants tenderness and affection, but above all, she's probably looking for a secure relationship. Now, if you kids are lucky enough to have a set of parents who love each other, and I want to clue you, it's very hard for parents to love their own children when they can't love each other, but if you've lucked out with these kind of parents, and if you girls are so fortunate to have a father you can truly respect, admire, and look up to, and I certainly don't mean because he's some big-shot businessman, but just because he's his own man. And girls, if you're so lucky to have a father you can communicate with, you'll never have this problem. But tragically in our society today, so many homes are divided by death, divorce, the father's too busy making money, maybe no ability to communicate. And many little girls with a deep-seated psychological need for love and security and understanding turn to a boyfriend who's got this tremendous sex drive, and you end up making a deal. Oh, I don't mean you plan it or reason it out. And I think most kids caught up in this thing don't mean to get caught up. Basically, you're pretty fine people. It's not the cheap little girl, it's not the guy on the meg, but it's nevertheless, this is tragic when it happens. You see, kids, I don't doubt that you may be quite well informed on the physical aspects of sex, but let me tell you, sex is more than physical. If it were only physical, that'd be one thing, but it is also interpersonal, psychological, social, and it is spiritual. And these four values far transcend the physical, but they can only be fulfilled within the framework of a fine and good marriage. And when you take sex out of the marriage union and put it in the backseat of a parked car, all you have left is the physical, and I don't care what you call it. It becomes very destructive, and it'll bring tragedy into your life. You see, if you get caught up in this situation, here's what happens. First of all, fellow, why don't you get honest with the girl and tell her you found exactly what you wanted from that relationship, the physical satisfaction and release that sex always brings a man. Girls, why don't you tell the boy that you didn't find what you wanted, because the security you long to have is clouded over by the constant fear that your friends are going to find out, school people, parents, you might end up an unwed mother, but really your greatest fear is how long is this guy going to keep going with you? You've given everything you have to give to this relationship. There's nothing left for you. And I don't doubt that most girls submit in the first place because they think a great deal of the boy. And you keep conning them, fella, into saying, come on, we love each other, it makes it right. It doesn't make it right. And you know what happens to that relationship? It continues to become more tense. I guess there are exceptions, maybe. But usually it becomes more tense. You get insanely jealous of each other. You bicker and you fight. You begin to doubt the fidelity of your partner. You never want your partner to ever talk to a person of the opposite sex without jealousy. You don't even want them to have friends of their own sex. And finally, the thing gets so bad that it's going to break up. And many girls at this point, having invested so much in that relationship, figure there's only one way out to save it. I'll become a mother. And when that happens, one tragedy is compounded upon another. How would you kids like to go home from school this afternoon and have your mother sit you down and say, honey, when I was your age, boy, was I a swinger. I lived it up with all the guys. Wouldn't you feel proud? How would you boys like your father sit you down and say, kid, when I was your age, I had a big reputation. I made it with all the women. That's why I'm such a good father and husband. I think you'd be rather repulsed. You know, a lot of times when I go into a classroom after an assembly, we have an exchange of ideas. Kids ask me questions. One question I always ask the young people is, do you have any gripes against your parents? And wow, do you have the gripes. And you're no different, but let's put the shoe on the other foot. In a few short years, nearly every one of you seated in this auditorium today will be parents. Do your children yet unborn have the right to a mother and a father they can truly respect, admire, and look up to? This country is in deep trouble. And no one knows it better than your generation. I believe I understand why young people protest any way you know how, and I can't say that I blame you. But my young friends, you're not going to change anything by simply protesting. You've got to realize that you're the future of America and of our world. And the values you have in life now are preparing you for the kind of leadership the country will have tomorrow. And what kind will it be? America needs changing, and so does the world. But it takes courage and determination and brains. Let me conclude by saying I think your life is composed in four major areas. You're physical beings, and this is why we plead with you to take care of this physical body. As a teenager, it seems you can get away with murder, literally, and not pay a price. In other words, you can play around with pot and LSD and sniff glue and get drunk and stay out all night and carouse and live around like that, and then you're resilient as a teenager and bounce back and say, it doesn't hurt me. But I assure you it is destroying this body, and one day down the pathway of life, you're going to reach out for the goals, hopes, aspirations, and dreams that are yours today. They may be within your grasp, and they'll turn to nothing because without a healthy body, you can't enjoy any phase of life. Secondly, you're an intellectual being, and you ought to develop your skills, talents, and abilities. I certainly do not believe every young person has to go to college. I think if you have the mental equipment and the ability, by all means, go and prepare yourself. But other kids have other great skills and talents. And I think in this country we've got to stop making second-class citizens out of kids who are potential PhDs. But whatever your abilities, prepare yourself, because if you don't, you'll end up on the short end of the stick in the future. Thirdly, you're a social being, and this is why as teenagers you like to have fun and dates and parties and scream your head off at a game and cry if you're losing and laugh if you're winning. And you ought to look back on your social life as a teenager as the most carefree, happy, and wonderful years of your life. Don't live it in the gutter. But the fourth thing you are is spiritual, and no one talks about this anymore in this country. And some people say, oh, spiritual, what do you mean, Yearout? Didn't you know God is dead? I'm sorry about yours. You say, isn't God dead? No, he isn't. How do you know? Well, for two reasons. Number one, I stood over here and talked to him just before I came out here to talk to you, or I wouldn't have the nerve, and I do this before every assembly, and I doubt if he died in the last 45 minutes. Secondly, he lives in my heart by faith in Jesus Christ. And when I say that on the campus, I see some people starting to sneer, and they say, oh, boy, we've got a real live religious kook here today. Well, I'm not religious. I agree with Lenin, who said religion is the opiate of the people. I happen to have a personal living relationship with Jesus Christ, God's Son, and that isn't religion, it's a way to live. And my faith gives my life meaning, purpose, and direction. My young friends, if you don't develop equally all four facets, the physical, the mental, the social, and the spiritual, you'll go through life like a flat tire. I came back to this part of the country from doing assemblies in Utah. About a month ago, the University of Utah, a combined student-faculty committee, invited Dr. Timothy Leary to appear on the campus. So many people wanted to hear him, they had to move into a 5,000-seat auditorium that was packed with mostly students. They paid $2 apiece to get in. That adds up to 10,000 bones. And if you don't know who Dr. Leary is, he's a former Harvard PhD who began experimenting with LSD on the campus and got involved so much in it with other faculty people and students, they finally kicked him off the campus. He's now formed a religious cult built around dope. He sat in that auditorium before 5,000 mostly university students, cross-legged, on a little rug with his long flowing hair and robe. And his advice to these collegians was that in this tragic hour of history, for them to freak out, drop out, smoke pot, take LSD, because that's the wave of the future. My young friends, if that is the only answer for tomorrow, God help us all. I just came up here from Oregon. Last week, a 14-year-old girl in Oregon took a pistol and blew her brains out and left a note and said, I've been sniffing glue and now I'm hooked, and so this is the only way out. Is that what you want to do with your life? And you say, Mr. Yearout, what is the future? What can I do? My young friends, you are the future, the only future there is. And with your wonderful minds and great opportunities, I plead with you to have the courage to live fantastic lives. Do you think it takes courage to smoke pot, to take LSD, to sniff glue? Do you think it takes courage, guys, to get with your buddies and get drunk? Do you think it takes courage to get out here in your car and drive at 100 miles an hour? That doesn't take courage. You think it takes courage to run down a football field and block and tackle? That doesn't take courage. It takes courage to stand in the face of a crowd of people who want to do the wrong thing and say, no, I stand for that which is right. And basically every one of you in this room knows what's right and what's wrong. And I beg of you to prepare yourselves to lead America and our world to a bright future, free of the tyranny, the hate, and the killing that's going on all over this world today. God help us. And I know you can do it, if you will. I want to commend you on being a fantastic audience. I know it's not comfortable in those bleachers. I can't believe your fine deportment, your wonderful response. It surely says something to me about you. And this is why I have great hope in your generation. Thank you, and may God bless you.